Ron Davidson, Rondavidson. Okay, well, Jolene was born March 25th, 1960. She was born and raised down in Arizona.
And in kindergarten, it was like a career day or something like that. My grandma remembers that as the kids went around saying, oh, I want to be a doctor or like, a pilot or something like that. My mom's answer was that she wanted to be a mom. Well, when she wasn't ever just a mom, she always worked my whole life. But I think it's a tribute to my grandma and how much she looked up to my grandma.
When she was younger, if I ever said, oh, you're just like your mom, she took that as an insult. She was like, no, I don't want to be like my mom. But as she became a mother, suddenly she started seeing all those characteristics that her mother had, and she started demonstrating those very same loving, kind, caring, nurturing characteristics that her own mother, and she changed from being insulted to being honored.
And one day, my wife Sylvia had to do something, so she said, take Jolene with you. I'm in the real estate business, and I had this client, and that client was upset with me. So I took her with me. She was a vivacious young baby with a lot of hair. We went over there, and the lady just fell in love with Jolene.
So with the family business, we all worked in it at one point or another. So my dad had property management and real estate. And so from the earliest time I can remember, we would go down and clean offices.
So they earned spending money that way. She always helped with that too. So we were always busy.
Grandpa Haywood, the grandpa, started the business, and Evans was, joined it and continued on with the family business. And so they were pretty close and they worked together. So they were, it was a pretty close relationship to them. I don't remember exactly how old she was when he passed away, but he'd gotten cancer. But it was hard for her.
She had a good relationship, a real good relationship with him. Loved him very much.
Kind of her first real, I think, spiritual challenge to see her grandfather pass away.
When he passed away, she was touched.
So that was kind of her first kind of challenge, where she had to really kind of look at her own beliefs and her own feelings about life after death and the gospel. I think it was maybe one of the beginnings of her own testimony.
One time I lost a little pocket knife and I was just bummed out. And she said, well, hey, let me see if I can help you. And we weren't finding it. She said, well, let's say a prayer. Okay. So anyways, after that, we found it. And so that always stuck with me, that she had the faith to say, hey, let's say a prayer and that'll help us find it. And sure enough, we did. So
when she was a teenager, her father was called as the branch president for a Spanish branch down in Arizona.
And my mom was basically, his right-hand man. So I think primary president and whatever else needed to be done. So they were very busy in that calling.
When she was a teenager in the Spanish branch, I think she didn't really feel like she fit in, or, I think it was just a hard time where she wanted to be with her friends and probably be an English-speaking ward, but they're in the Spanish-speaking branch.
She was not very happy because she was just barely in Mutual when we were called there. So we finally ended up having her go to Mutual in the ward that we lived in, and then she'd attend Sunday meetings with us at the Spanish ward there.
So because she was the oldest, she got the distinct responsibility to babysit the younger ones all the time.
We'd go off and be gone 2 or 3 days and leave Jolene in charge and never worried a thing.
I've heard that she was very responsible and took matters into her own hand and was very firm with being the one in charge. I think her siblings have some good stories about that.
And one time my parents were not in the home and something happened, I don't know what, but she was obviously upset. So she locked me in my parents' shower with my clothes on, and she turned the water on, and it was a glass shower door, and I was really mad. Let me out, and she didn't. So I kicked the door and broke the glass and shattered it. And then I really started crying because I thought I would be in big trouble.
My friends and I would climb up on the roof of the backyard, and then we'd run and jump into the pool. And so we were up there, and we'd climb around and we'd run it. And one time I remember she came running out, started yelling at us. And I remember I was so scared, I went and hid at my friend's house. I was afraid to go home because she got after us about running off the pool. Whereas my mom, I don't think really cared so much. But when she was gone, Jolene was making sure none of that happened.
And she was a tomboy. She would beat the crud out of us. Stay away from her legs, man. She could kick like a horse.
And she's also a good softball player. I can remember going down, it was at Madison Elementary School. And I can remember she was always hitting home runs. And I think if they hit a home run, I can't remember if they got something from the snack bar, like a free drink or something.
She was about in the 5th grade, and I told her, I said, hey, Jolene, I'll give you $1 for every home run you can hit. And every time she'd get up, she'd hit it out of the park. And then after about 4 or 5 that field, they wouldn't pitch to her anymore. She was pretty ticked off. She cut off her money supply.
She was very social and had lots of good friends, whether it be in school or church activities or girls' camp. They loved pulling pranks and stuff at girls' camp.
There's a story, I don't know it too well, but at girls' camp, they took a fishing line and they tied it to like the dinner bell.
There's a dinner bell that they would ring, and my mom and her friends took some fishing line and they tied it on the bell and they ran it all the way to their cabin.
And then they strung it back to their tent. And then in the middle of the night, they would just like pull on the string and then pull the dinner bell.
And in the middle of the night, they would ring the bell over and over again.
There was a family in El Salvador in Central America. The oldest daughter rolled up to saw President Elder Stapley's picture on the front of a Leona magazine.
So what happened is that I wanted to come to the United States. I'm the oldest, and I wanted to come to the United States really bad. So I started writing letters, and I wrote a letter to an apostle, Delbert L. Stapley. And Elder Stapley is from Arizona, and he somehow says that he felt the Spirit to help me.
Dad was a state president in Phoenix, so he sent it to him. And he showed it to us, and we said, oh, we'll take her.
While my mom was there, she shared rooms with all 3 of the foster kids.
The interesting thing about the Hayes is that you were not a stranger. You were just like one of the kids, part of the family. Oh, this is our new daughter. It was not like, oh, this is so-and-so is visiting from whatever the country. No, this is our new daughter.
Jolene was 12 years old. When I came in, I was 15. And she was a lovely young lady, girl. The beautiful girl shared her bed with me, shared her dresser, shared everything, although I couldn't speak English. Now, she was a little better with me because she already had Yvonne for 4 years to practice.
Imagine, Jolene, this is her 3rd time again, all over again, having to share her dresser, having to share her bed.
It was serious business for them to learn English, and so Jolene was able to help Yvette primarily learn English so that she could move on to college and other places and things like that.
She was always looking out for me and making sure that I didn't get in trouble. She always followed the rules. That's what I wanted to tell you. She was very, something that I want to mention. She was very, very good at following the rules.
Lori Watkins was a very good friend. They were in the same ward and in the same high school. We were in
Played together on the volleyball team.
Sports together.
Lori was also a co-captain with her senior year on her volleyball team.
Jolene was a great athlete, though. She did really well in volleyball, even got invited up to BYU to try out for their women's volleyball team.
She had a boyfriend in high school. His name was David.
Oh, yeah. Kissy Gardner, yeah.
From different sources of her brothers, I've heard that they always were fighting.
He was a putz. Yeah. We didn't like him.
After high school, they broke up, and she decided in college that she did not want to be tied down. She felt like she had been tied down during high school, and she didn't get a chance to really go out and date a big variety of boys. Jolene once made a kind of a vow to herself that she would not get married until she graduated from college.
Jolene was the first one to leave home. I can remember she actually, when she left home, that our dentist, Dr. Nichols, had a blazer that she was going to drive up to school. That was almost more cool than her leaving, was that the fact that she got to drive this cool blazer up to school. But I can actually remember that day.
So one of her roommates' name was Chris, and I don't know too much about Chris other than that they were really good friends and they had a lot of adventures together.
I met Jolene at BYU when we were living in Pineview apartments, and she wasn't my roommate, but she was my neighbor. And somehow we got doing stuff together, and she was really fun.
So my mom went to school for elementary education.
I am not sure if she studied anything else or if she looked at anything else, but I think it was always just, I'm going to be a teacher.
And I remember, so she went away to college for a year, and then she came back and she worked for a year so she could earn more money to go back from college. And she told me later, when she was an adult and I was an adult, that during that time she was called to be a primary teacher in our ward. And she says, you know, it's kind of, that's when it clicked, when I decided I wanted to be a teacher. She says it just came naturally to me.
So when Jolene was a senior in college, she opted to do the BYU intern program, where they actually go out and get a job as a school teacher, a full-time job as a school teacher, while they're finishing up classes at BYU. And she was assigned to school in West Valley, Jackling Elementary School.
Anyway, we both moved to Salt Lake, and then we were roommates in an apartment in West Valley City.
So they decided together that they needed to find a singles ward for them to attend. Now, I don't know why or how they chose the one that was clear out in Sandy, because they lived in West Valley.
We were going to a singles ward in Draper because one of my friends from horseback riding was in that ward, and she invited us to come to that ward. And it was just a booming singles ward, and I believe she met Ron there.
But they ended up choosing the one in Sandy, which is the same singles ward that I lived in. I lived in the boundaries of that state. And so she was just, her and Chris were both so outgoing and friendly, and just always had so much energy. They were so bubbly and friendly that you just couldn't help be attracted to them. They were always a pair. Chris and Jolene were always together.
Initially, my mom thought my dad was interested in Chris, but my dad made a point to say, like, no, I want to get to know you and see who you are. And
I invited Jolene over to my house because we were doing family home evening. We'd do family home evening on Sunday nights. And I invited her over to my house, and she said, oh, that sounds like fun. I'll see if Chris can come. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. This is supposed to be, I didn't say this, but in my mind I was like, okay, I was asking you on a date, and now Chris is coming?
I remember kind of thinking, oh, she's gonna be doing stuff with Ron, but they always included me. We were all still doing things together, so it was really fun. Ron was really a lot of fun, and Jolene was really fun still. One day I had to go to a repair shop for my Rabbit because it had needed new mufflers or whatever, and so the shop took way too long, and I was going to end up just being late for work. So I called in work and I said, I don't know when they're going to be done with this car. I said, I'm not going to be able to make it tonight. So I called in sick to work because of that. And suddenly they were done with the car. Suddenly, right after I called, they were done with the car. So I thought, well, now what am I going to do? So I thought, I'm going to call Jolene. So I called Jolene on the phone and I said, what are you doing tonight? And back then, to call somebody on short notice was like a no-no. You didn't do that. You always called, 3 or 4 days or a week in advance to give them some time to prepare. I called her and I said, hey, do you want to go do something tonight? And she said, sure, when? I said, right now. And she said, what do you want to do? I said, let's go to a movie. And so out there in West Valley by her house, there was a Savanna Smiles was the movie at the time, and I decided to take her to Savanna Smiles that night. She did tell me that she liked Ron, and she did say that she thought she was going to marry him. So, but I don't remember why, but probably because he was fun and he didn't really cramp her style.
She's the one that could bring some organization to Ron's thoughts and feelings, and throughout their life, she was the brains of the operation.
They fell in love, and Ron fell really, really hard for Jolene. You can kind of tell, you know, when you're the mom, they talk about him a lot more. They have big smiles on their faces, and they kind of lift up off the ground a little bit.
My dad grew up in Utah. I think it was mostly Sandy, Salt Lake City area.
My dad is one of 9 siblings, and he's one of the older siblings.
I love to explore. I would take off on my tricycle and not just drive the neighborhood, but I wonder what's in that neighborhood over there. So I'd just keep going.
One thing about him when he was really quite little, he had a bicycle. Well, this one day he didn't go down the street. He went up the street, and he got tired and decided he would lay down on the side of the road and have a little nap. And he laid down, and this truck driver came along, seeing this little kid sitting by his bicycle asleep on the ground. And of course I'm panicked by this time because I don't know where he is. I'm looking everywhere and no one's brought him home yet. This guy picks him up, realizes he's just asleep, and brings him home. Yeah, Ron was a free spirit.
He loves adventure, he loves the mountains, he can wear a cowboy hat and it looks good on him. I try to put the cowboy hat on and I try to measure up, but I never quite can measure up to Ron's, cowboyness.
I know that he and Greg used to fight a little bit, but they're best friends now. And I told them they would be. Said, you better be good to each other because someday you'll be best friends.
I was the big brother, he was the little brother. I found myself torturing him on occasion.
We were a boating family and we loved to go to Lake Powell, and we still love to go to Lake Powell.
And of course he could build boats. He also worked for his dad when they were building boats.
My dad served his mission in Italy, and he was able to actually serve with his brother Greg for a week, because Greg was also in the Italy mission. Well, different Italy mission, but just like right next to it.
He asked his mission president if he could come down before he went home, if he could come down and serve with me for a week. And so they said, the mission presidents got together and they said, they're both good missionaries, why not? So they let Greg come down and he worked with me for a week in Rome.
And I was a by-the-book missionary, right? All the rules, I was right down the line. Ron, on the other hand, was, it was all heart. And he was willing to go where, where the Spirit led, irrespective of, whether the rules dictated something or not.
And so the first time I ever met Ron was when she graduated. So it was actually at the graduation ceremony.
Remember, he was kind of goofy, like he had the tassel. I think he put her graduation hat on him and like had the tassel in the middle of the head. And he was just being Ron. He was being a clown and a jokester. So. And
Ron came in, and I can remember my parents' reaction was kind of like a little bit like apprehensive.
I'm not sure how my dad felt about him at first. He was kind of weighing him out and seeing what kind of guy this was that was going to try to romance his oldest daughter.
That's the first time we met him. He was a character, and of course she liked the character, so that worked out real well. Good guy.
I do remember when they got married, and I was excited for him, and I felt like she was a good fit. She had strengths that he didn't have, and he had strengths that I thought would be helpful for her, and so I thought they'd make a great pair.
Well, it was a great dynamic and a great example because Ron is much more like my husband with his personality, and I'm much more like Jolene. Less spontaneous, not as fun. I like to think things through and everything has purpose. So it was a good example to me of how to enjoy the fun, silly part of my husband, because that's what she did, is when Ron was being silly and goofy, even though she was more serious, she would see the fun in it and laugh with him and enjoy, his quirky, spunky personality.
I remember one time when Ron just was talking about their marriage and how
he felt so, I guess, relaxed and peaceful with it, and it was his favorite part. Like, we're just so comfortable with each other. We love being together.
I did 1 year in 3rd grade at Fox Hills with my mom. For my mom's birthday 1 year, Craig, my uncle, had a big gorilla suit, and Craig's a big, tall guy.
And the gorilla suits have huge foam pads in the shoulders, and so it makes the gorilla look really big.
But Craig has this gorilla costume that is just bizarre, but so funny. And so it was her birthday, and for some reason I was at school with her on her birthday.
And I remember he and I snuck into the school during some break.
And suddenly this gorilla walks in.
But imagine a 300-pound looking gorilla walking into an elementary school classroom.
He, dressed as a gorilla, ran into her classroom and picked her up and swung her around.
The kids all go like, what's going on? So they were kind of confused and kind of going crazy. He leads the class in singing happy birthday to her, and then he just kind of leaves.
She thought it was so funny, but also I think she was a little bit upset that he messed up her schedule that day.
And I just remember my mom laughing and laughing and laughing and just being so surprised. And I think she was a pretty strict teacher, but she also knew how to have fun and how to, laugh a lot as a teacher. And I think that made her a great teacher, and I think her students respected her for that.
When I became a teacher, she gave me the advice of, you don't have fun with the kids the first month. You really hound in the expectations, and then you can have fun with them, but they know that you expect them to behave. So you set that boundary of, we can have lots of fun, but also when I say stop, we're gonna stop.
I remember one time she was teaching 5th grade and she was telling me about it. She said, I had these 4 rowdy boys in the class. They challenged me to a one-on-one on basketball.
She kind of made a deal with him, was like, okay, if I win, you have to be quiet, no more talking. If you win, then there was some reward for him. So she took the whole class outside, and of course she beat him.
I gave one a hip and one an elbow. They said, Mrs. Davison, where'd you learn that? Hey, I got 4 brothers. I played ball. I know how to do that. And she cleaned her clock.
I started volunteering a little bit at her school. In fact, I helped them put on a play. I kind of directed a play that they were putting on in the 5th grade. And her principal at the time came up to me after the play was over, and he said, Ron, I don't know what you do for a living, but you missed your calling. After we were married, I told you that I had vowed I was never going to go to school again. Well, she started kind of working on me a little bit. And so I went back to school, and I was working at the boat shop at Hydro Swift at the time. I would go to school at nights. Now the reason why I bring this up is because I thought we had a great relationship, but when I became a school teacher, suddenly we could talk about school and about our kids and all of that sort of stuff. And we became so much closer than I ever thought we could be. It was absolutely amazing to me that we could even become closer, and we understood each other, and we could come home and vent and talk about the kids. Kids are driving me crazy. Jolene she was pretty nervous about having children. And she didn't feel like, and she still had that little bit of a kind of a rebellious attitude. So she wasn't like, we're gonna get married and have kids right away and I'm gonna stay home and take care of the kids. Her idea was, we're gonna get married and have fun and play, and then we'll get around to having kids, and then we'll see what's what then. She loved her teaching job. She felt like she had a big influence with the kids. We happened to watch on PBS a program that they were airing about the conception and the growth of a baby inside of a woman, and they had it was really amazing. It was like advanced technology for the time, because they had camera footage and ultrasound of this baby growing in this person. And we were both of us really, really enthralled. And so after the show was over, I looked at Jolene and I said, so do you think we're ready to maybe have a baby? And she said, well, yeah, we could try. I want to say 2 weeks later, she was like, I think I might be pregnant. And she woke up early so that she could go work out, and she came back home and she did the P test thing. And when she looked at it, it turned out negative. And she was like, oh, good, you know, like it looks like, because she was getting kind of worried, getting kind of scared. Not that she didn't want to have a baby, but the idea of actually going through with it kind of, you know, had her apprehensive. And so she woke me up and it was time to go, and so we always had prayers before she left, because she always left early. And in the prayer, I said, please help the pregnancy test be positive. And so then after the prayer, she went down there and it was positive. So we kind of feel like there was a little immaculate conception going on there, a little something, you know, with that in regards to Savanna. At the time, I was in the video business. I was videotaping performances at the Dickens Festival. When it was getting close to delivering Savanna, I said, I want to videotape it. And I was all excited to watch this thing and film it while we were doing it. And all of a sudden, the heart monitor started going wacko, just blah, 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 blah. And the doctor, just like that, said, oh, we're gonna have to take her C-section. So all of a sudden they sprung into action, trying to get her quickly into the emergency room so that they could do an emergency C-section with Savanna. Of course, I had the camera, so I was like, okay, I'll come along. He's like, leave the camera. You can come, leave the camera. I was in complete shock. We thought it was going to be like this fantastic, emotional experience, but it turned out it was just, for me, a terrible shock. In fact, when they had cut her open, they had something from on the inside. I think it was her placenta or something that they had, and they put it up here above her belly while they were working on sewing her back up after they got Savanna out. And I thought it was her heart. And I was like, oh no, what are they doing to my wife? But I was panicked. And as soon as they got Savanna out, they had a pediatrician there to revive Savanna, because Savanna had her heart had stopped or stopped breathing or whatever. So they had to revive Savanna, get her going. And then the doctor, the pediatrician, took me with Savanna into the other room while they, you know, put Jolene all back together. And I remember thinking to myself, at least I've got Savanna, because I thought my wife was going to die. So, of course, she didn't. So that was a good thing. The interesting thing about naming Savanna was because Jolene was a school teacher, she had a lot of names that she did not want to name her kids because they brought back memories from certain students. So every time I would suggest a name, she would, oh, no, you can't, no, that's not a good name. No, that's not a good name. One day we were sitting there, this is before Savanna was born. One day she was sitting there, she said, what about Savanna? And I said, yes, that's it, that's perfect. Because our first date was Savanna Smiles.
When she had recovered a little bit and about had her wits back, she asked my dad, like, well, what are we going to name the baby?
And she said, what are we going to name her? And I said, what do you mean? What? She's already named. Her name is Savanna. Doesn't she look like Savanna? And she goes, oh, yes, she does. And so that's how Savanna got named Savanna. And that was the birth of our first child.
When he called me to tell me that they'd had the baby, it weighed this much, it was this long, and the birth went fine, everything was fine. I said, so what is it? He says, oh, Mom, I got my Savanna.
Savanna was the prettiest baby, and it was just so fun being with her. I remember the day she got home from the hospital, Jolene had all these sweet little clothes, and I swear we tried every outfit on Savanna. Jolene and I, you know, of course, we're out having fun shopping in Mervyn's. I don't know if you remember that particular store, but Savanna threw up and I caught it. I'm like, Jolene, what do I do? What do I do? And she's like, drop it and let's run. So I'm like, okay. So I dropped it and We hightailed it out of there. I felt terribly guilty about that.
In between Savanna and Marie, she got pregnant again, and we were trying to get pregnant. We felt like it was time, but immediately there were issues. And within 6 to 8 weeks, she ended up miscarrying the child.
So when she had her miscarriage, I was actually a student at BYU, and she asked me if I wanted to come up for the weekend to spend with them, which sometimes I would. I'm like, sure. So I went up, and then she told me that she had a miscarriage, and it was just kind of a hard time for her.
What I didn't realize, and I never knew this until I read her journals after she passed away, was for her, it was a very emotional feeling. She grieved the baby. She felt like she grieved alone because I missed it.
Marie texted me a journal entry from Jolene wrote in her journal about her miscarriage. It says, "It has been 1 week since I had my D&C. I'm feeling much better. Even though I was very weak at the beginning of the week, I'm still very emotional. It's hard to think that I have really lost my child. It has been comforting to hear about others who have had miscarriages and then gone on to have healthy children. It's just that it's one more thing to fear when you think about the miracle of life."
I didn't even realize that she was going through all these emotions. And that is one thing that as I read through her journals that I felt like I totally missed that. I should have been more caring. I should have been more thoughtful. 6 months later, we were able to try again. And then Marie, she got pregnant with Marie. When Marie was born, it was a scheduled C-section. We went in, we knew when she was going to be born, everything in advance, and it was aside from her recovery, everything else was not traumatic at all.
So the first time that I went to Ron and Jolene's house, I was young and I was totally in love with Tim, and I was so nervous, and he was taking me to meet his family, and so I was super excited. And we got there and he introduced us and we sat down in their living room, and then Ron and Jolene and Tim left me just sitting there, and the girls came in, and Savanna was, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old, somewhere in there, and she was just jumping around and telling me all kinds of stories. And she said, my dad likes to run around the house in his panties. And I was like, oh, okay.
I remember being in their house and opening their pantry, and she had like all these rules printed out on the back of their pantry. But they were really good rules. What I liked about Jolene was they were very practical too. Like, when you're first driving, you can't have any friends in the car with you for the first 3 or 6 months. When you first drive, you can't listen to the radio, just because she wanted her children to pay attention to their driving.
Side of her fridge, she had all these sheets of paper that were, the weekly menus. And I just was like, oh my gosh, she is on top of things.
My mom was a very kind mother. She's also very strict.
Like, yeah, you can make that choice, but this is the consequence, and I won't forget this.
Kind of what she said went, and she had routines and things that we needed to get done, and they just got done. I don't remember if there were punishments that were involved if we didn't, but she was pretty stern and strict and like, nope, this is what we do. Nope, you have to do it.
One time I had to go to the bathroom during sacrament, and my mom told me, if you really need to go, you can go. You should go. But just know that when we get home, you're going to have to make up this time that you left, because sacrament's important. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go to the bathroom, because I was little and I wanted to get out of sacrament meeting for a second. And so when I got home, she had me sit on the chair in the front room. I don't know, it was probably just 5 minutes, but it felt like forever. And I had to sit in my dress and sit reverently to make up that time that I missed in sacrament meeting.
For example, we live near the candy factory in Alpine, Utah. So when she took her girls on their little day field trip to Alpine, Utah, she called me, who lived 5 minutes away, and said, we are on a field trip today to see the candy store. Now we'd like to come visit you. So just that, being specific about these quality, fun days with her girls, and then, oh, and now we're going to go visit our family because our family is important. So very specifically, I literally took notes of how she was parenting her daughters because it was just so well thought out.
I remember she called me and said, let's go to women's conference. So we started going to women's conference together, and we went every year. And she always brought a little ice chest, because after the conference was over, then she'd go over to the creamery and make sure that she brought home BYU ice cream, and she always had to have a mint brownie.
So because my mom worked full-time, when she wasn't off track and we were at school, my grandma Davidson, Nelda, would babysit us a lot.
We would always take Grandma Davidson out to dinner, to lunch. We would go downtown, usually go to the Joseph Smith building and have a very fancy lunch with Grandma, and then walk around Temple Square. I feel like my mom didn't expect my grandma to watch us out of charity. She wanted to make sure that Grandma Davidson was being compensated and knew that how much my mom appreciated her watching us. And so she would take Grandma out to lunch when she could, and she would pay her for watching us.
I was pleased that she thought enough of me and trusted me enough to let me care for her babies. And they were, oh dear. Anyway, they're special girls, and they're special because they had special parents. And they did a good job of raising them. Jolene was always here for anything that we had. If we were having a party or just a get together or anything, Jolene was here. She went to Lake Powell with us every year. She was just, she was very much a part of our family, and we all loved her very much.
The first year we were married, they decided they were going to show off my father-in-law's Hydro Swift boats. I had just learned to water ski, and they decided to pull 10 skiers. And I thought, okay, I've learned to water ski, I'm part of the crowd now. And I was the only one who fell. The only one. And being new in the family, I didn't understand the family's humor. And so they were kind of saying, oh, one person messed up.
We had 10 till somebody screwed up.
One person, you know, made it so we had to do it again, and I think it was all in fun, but I just felt horrible, and I was so new, and I felt like I'd ruined everything. And Jolene, after a while, kind of stood up for me and said, you know, there's too much pressure in this family. And all of a sudden, and then they laughed about it, and I realized it was more, you know, more of a fun thing, but she just kind of came to my rescue. And as I was new, she really, really made sure to spend time with me and make me feel included, because it was such a huge family.
There was a time when Ruth and I moved to Arizona. She made sure we connected with her family. Actually introduced me to some business people there and helped me find work there, find a career.
When I first got engaged to Tony, who was her brother, and we just immediately clicked. She got me, I got her. She was a lot of fun. She liked to do stuff. It was Jolene and Deanna and me, and we were just out having fun like we always did. And we got into a little fender bender, and I got out of the car and chased him down into an apartment parking lot, you know, so I could tell the police what the license plates were. A little bonding experience.
She started the Davidson newsletter, and she would track down everyone's letter at the end of the year.
Marie is like her mother in that it would be her mother that would think of doing something like this. She's the one, like I said, who started the newsletters.
Every single week, she would send a letter around, and this is when email was fairly new, so it kind of dates us. But she literally would talk about everything they did and send pictures and everything. And that was one of the qualities I most admired about her, is her organization.
And Jolene had the ability to see the importance now. If we do a newsletter now than in 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Our kids, our grandkids, our great-grandkids, this is going to be a treasure to them.
So every year, my whole entire life, we would go up to Jackson Hole with the Haywood family.
We didn't live in Arizona. We didn't get to see all the kids, the Arizona Haywoods and the cousins and stuff growing up. So our kids love spending that time with the other Haywood kids, the other Haywood cousins, and they had a great time, and it turned into a kind of a family reunion. It still is.
And in the evenings, everybody usually will go out on the lawn in their chairs and stuff and visit, and kids will play games, and it's just been a very, very nice thing for family unity.
On Monday was FHE, and we'd always play tennis ball, which was baseball with tennis rackets and tennis balls, so we could all hit home runs.
One of my all-time funniest moments in my life, we were walking back from the Bar J which is a restaurant where they have like a musical show, to our condo, which is about probably a mile away. Our other brother-in-law, Craig, had this gorilla suit. He jumped out in front of us. I have never seen Ron dance so much in my life. He just was so scared, and it was just so funny. It was really funny.
I think that Craig and I, who's our brother-in-law, Jill's husband, I think that he and I one year decided that we had been down the river enough on our own that we could probably do it by ourselves.
We're doing pretty good, but we were all a little nervous about the challenge, and we came down to the big, I don't think it's the big, lunch counter is the name of the big rapid right there where everybody takes their pictures.
Coming down the river, they kind of looked to me as the guide because I had run the river before, I had kayaked before. A guide from one of the other rafts looked at me as we were coming down the river, and he pointed at me and he goes,
we came down, and there were lots of people, including Jolene and Jill, that were on the shore taking pictures of us, and we were kind of hooting and hollering to make sure they knew it was us. And here we go down into that rapid. The wave caught us, tipped the boat over, and we all went under. All of us, including Marie.
Yeah, we were in the drink. The paddle goes up in the air, you can see the yellow thing. She's just having a good time going down the river. It's like...
And when we finally made it down to the takeout point, Jolene came up and she started yelling. She yelled at me, she yelled at Craig, she yelled at Tim, she yelled at all of us.
She could get as angry as she could have fun, maybe more.
We put her daughter in danger, and we should have known better, and all of this sort of stuff. She was not happy.
And so, yeah, I think that was a long week for Ron.
Lake Powell was another annual family vacation with the Davidson side.
Jolene also had a taste for adventure, and Savanna and Marie ended up with those traits. I mean, they loved coming up to the mountains with us.
Well, the kids loved Lake Powell. They loved water skiing. In fact, this family still goes to Lake Powell every year.
These Lake Powell trips are a pretty big deal. And one year in particular, we decided to have all the adults get together and have a planning meeting. And as we went through, we're planning food and who's coming down what day and different things. And we're all laughing hysterically because they're all so funny. And every few minutes when we get too far off track, Jolene would say, focus, focus. And she would get us all back on track. And she would let a little fun happen and a few jokes go off, but then once again, focus, focus.
One time when I was out at the boat shop, some guy came in to the boat shop and he had an old 1965 Hydro Swift. I brought it home, I drove up, and here's this boat, this piece of crap boat on the back of my truck. And Jolene flipped out. She was like, "What are you doing? We don't want that. It's a piece of crap. We can't go boating in this. This is terrible." So this is what she wrote. On August 27, 1992, Jolene wrote, "Ron is still working on his boat. I am really beginning to see that this is not a project for some income, but a hobby that Ron is thoroughly enjoying." I just want to sell it and get some of the money that has been invested in it back. Maybe I'll sell it myself. So that was what Jolene wrote. And the interesting thing is, the next summer I got it finished, and I completely refurbished the whole thing, put a new floor in it, new carpet, new interior, everything. And we took it out as a family. Jolene never mentioned selling it again.
When I was 10, my mom and I, along with my cousin Katie and Grandma and Grandpa Haywood, we took a trip, a church history trip, out to Kirtland, Ohio. And my grandpa rented us a little red sedan that we named Ruby Red. And then we went to Kirtland. And then we drove from Kirtland to Palmyra. Then we went to the Sacred Grove. And I remember after every day, we would go out and do something. And then we'd come home and back to the hotel. And my mom would get out her scriptures or her journal, and she would write down what we had done that day. And then after Palmyra, we went to Maryland, where we met up with Tony and Jana, who were living out there.
One of the museums, we did this social experiment where we found a coin purse and we tore off a corner of a $5 bill and had it sticking out of the coin purse, and then we tossed it on the ground, and then we just laughed about the people that would pick it up and throw it down because they were irritated. We also went on other vacations together. There was the Washington, D.C. We went to Lake Tahoe together. We went to Disneyland together.
My mom loved Disneyland. I don't think she loved it as much as I love it, but I remember booking it over to Splash Mountain or something, and she wasn't my mom then. She was just a kid, and she was having so much fun. And I feel like the reason that I love that so much now is because it reminds me of that moment.
Every year we pretty much also went to Moab every Easter. My dad loved to go jeeping.
He has a Jeep. When he was 16, he bought a Jeep. And that Jeep is still on the road today.
So I have a Jeep, a 1976 Jeep CJ7 that I bought when I was a senior in high school.
April Safari down in Moab, and they go on trails that are incredible. I've been with him, so I know that sometimes you have to get out and walk because you can't handle what's ahead of you. And he does it in his little old Jeep.
So we started going down to Moab in 1995. That was our first year going to Moab. And then we always went after that. Then one year, and we woke up one morning and there was 12 inches of snow on the ground. And Jolene and Marie decided, we're not going out jeeping in this. We're not going out in this. But once we got down into Moab, the snow, it had snowed, but it had melted. It was just wet, and we had a great time jeeping. Or Marie and Jolene back in the camper, they couldn't leave the camper because even though it started warming up and it melted all the snow, everything turned to mud. So they couldn't leave the camper at all that whole entire day.
My dad loved Moab, and we would go, once my dad discovered it, we'd go pretty often, but my mom did not like to camp without showers and bathrooms.
But you know what? She never, ever, ever stayed in that camper again, ever in her life. But that was actually turned out to be a good thing, because after she passed away, I could go to Moab without having it be a huge emotional thing for me, because I had gotten used to going to Moab by myself, or, well, not by myself, but I'd either take Savanna or Marie with me.
We met Jolene when we moved into the ward in 1995.
So part of the time while I was the bishop, she was the young women's president. She also had a great, strong feeling that the young women should have as much fun as the young men. And she came to me once and said, how come the young women don't get to do the fun stuff? I said, Jolene, do the fun stuff. And she did.
I always thought it was funny because my mom does not like camping. She doesn't want to camp without a toilet. But she did want the young women, to have just as many adventures as the young men with the Boy Scouts got.
Savanna and our daughter Margaret played lacrosse together in high school, And so I had a lot of opportunities to be with Jolene at the games and watch Savanna play. Jolene was a very supportive sports mom.
And so with Savanna's lacrosse game, she was at every single one. She was the parent rep for I think a couple years.
When I was on the lacrosse team, she was on the parent committee and she would do the stats. She'd sit at the table and do the stats and keep the score.
So that was fun to have her at every single game, rain or shine, or, she was there the whole time.
She would get up every morning at 5:30 in the morning and go work out. And then she'd come back and go to school, come home from school and take her 15-minute nap and then be ready for the dinner rush.
So this is just a card that she would fill out at Marv Jensen every day. It's got different months of the year and it's just got 31 days. And every day she would write down what she did. So it was like treadmill, bike, elliptical. She just really loved how exercising and eating healthy made her feel. And she's a really good example of that her whole life, of just taking care of her body. And
towards the end of her life, she, really got into running and doing races, half marathons.
And so my sophomore year of high school, she convinced me to do a half marathon with her. So for about 4 months, when I was 15, I would wake up with her so early, and we either got to the gym at 5 or 5:30 in the morning. But it was a lot of fun to do that project with her, and I'm glad that she convinced me to run with her, because ever since that first half marathon with her, I've been able to do a few more, and it's been really fun every time. And it's just a fun way to remember her and I'll do a half marathon, and then just helps me remember my mom.
She's like, yeah, it's really cool. Like, you go to this one, it's like called the donut run. So you get this really cool medal and have like a donut on it. And then you like get donuts after you finish the race.
I first met Jolene, she was in the ward. She either noticed me running. She eventually approached me and said, I want to run a half marathon. And so we started training one way or another. We really had a good time running up and down and just laughing.
She was at her healthiest, I would have said, and yet she was dealing with things she didn't even know that were going on inside her.
But everybody knew that Jolene was a BYU football fan.
She really loved the BYU U of U rivalry, and she was working at Skyline High School, and she would make a big deal about the rivalry with all her other coworkers.
And she had a garden gnome that she put out in this little courtyard at the school outside of the library. She loved BYU, and she found a little baby BYU t-shirt that she put over the gnome and then made a blue paper cone to go over the red. And the students thought it was hilarious to go. We would come one morning and they would have printed off a University of Utah U and had pinned it to the gnome out in the out in the courtyard.
She was a teacher for quite a while and then decided to become a librarian. So I think that suited her personality more.
And she had to go back and get her master's degree to get that job, which she did.
She said, I don't have to grade papers anymore. I don't have to do parent-teacher conferences. She didn't have to deal with a lot of the things that teachers had to deal with.
I met Jolene because Jolene and I went to Skyline at the district transferred us both to Skyline in the same year. And since we were both new, we kind of had an automatic bond because she was just so positive and so vivacious, and everybody just wanted to get to know her. We had teachers that would come down and say, I can't get my computer to turn on. Jolene just took it as a wonderful challenge and just helped everybody.
You could come in with the stupidest question and she would fix it and not make you feel stupid at all.
It was at a BYU game. We were at a BYU game using my dad's season tickets. Any chance she got to use anybody's tickets, she would go.
And it was a really hot game. And so she put sunscreen on because their seats were on the east side, and so it was always in the sun the whole time. As she was putting on sunscreen, that she noticed this lump on her neck, and she didn't think much about it. But that was the first time that she noticed it. And then 1 or 2 weeks later is when she got like a really nasty cold, and she couldn't sleep at night because she was just so congested. And so
she was thinking she had another growth over here, And that's what we both, I mean, it looks like you've got another cyst. You're gonna have to go see a doctor about that.
My mom, she always wrote a weekly letter, and then it turned into a blog. And so this is just a book of her blog that I made. It's nothing fancy, it's just printed out what her words. And so it was November 23rd, 2000 week, and she titled it Trials. She says, "My week has been memorable, shocking. On Friday, I learned that I have adenocarcinoma, yes, cancer.
And I know adenocarcinoma is not only lung cancer, it's also, I think, breast cancer, and it could also be, I think, one other type of cancer. We do have cancer on my side of the family, so I'm like, oh, whatever, like, it's probably just breast cancer, just, get them cut off, get a new set, you're good to go."
Since I haven't had any problems with coughing or digestion, I feel that it is probably breast cancer. So tomorrow, Ron will go with me for the PET scan, where we will find out what the future holds for us. Like I said, I haven't felt sick at all. In fact, I am calm. The only problem is that I break down when I tell people and see their concern and love for me. I will do my best to keep each of you informed with what is taking place. I would appreciate your love and prayers not only for me, but for Ron, the girls, and the medical staff that will be helping us through this event. At this time of Thanksgiving, I am truly grateful for the many blessings that I have, especially the gospel. Love, Jolene.
I remember the day she came back to school after getting the diagnosis, and she sat out in her car for quite a while before she came back into school. I think we cried more than she did. She was so positive, and we're falling apart. She's the one keeping us all together. And she was that way to the end.
I remember that it was a Saturday morning, and I was your typical 16-year-old. I had things to do and people to see, and my dad kind of called Savanna and I in and said, "Hey, we need to talk for a minute. Come and sit down." And my whiny self kind of rolled my eyes and was like, "Okay, when are we going to get done with this?" Because I kind of assumed that it was just like, "Hey, these are the chores we need to get done today," or "Hey, this is what we're going to do." But I remember we just sat down at the kitchen table, and my dad just kind of said, "Hey, so we got some news this week, and we're just going to be open and honest. Mom has cancer." And I remember in that moment, just the clearest revelation, I guess you could say, came into my mind. The voice just said, "She is going to die."
They told us, and then I left pretty shortly after to go back down to BYU. And I just remember driving down and just kind of being in shock, not knowing what to expect or what it really meant or what it would be.
But I'm really grateful for that conversation, and even though it was probably no more than 10 minutes long, and just that bolt of inspiration, even though I brushed it aside, I think it prepared me immensely for what was coming.
When it came back and it was lung cancer, that was very surprising. She doesn't fit the typical lung cancer stereotypical patient, that they're smoking all the time, chain smokers, and super unhealthy. So she was super healthy, didn't smoke, didn't drink. They found out later, I think Ron was watching the news with Get Part, and they were talking about radon in the homes and then how that can cause lung cancer. And so they tested their home for radon, and it was elevated. And so they think that's possibly how she got the lung cancer.
She goes on to say about she should find out more details about what I'm faced with tomorrow. Hopefully I hear from Dr. Davis in the morning and get the results from the scan. Then on Tuesday, they'll have surgery to try and remove the lymph nodes that is causing the lump on my neck, so the race begins. So I feel like she just kept continually referring to her cancer as a race because, she loved her runs and she loved her half marathons and her triathlons and all that stuff.
We all know her famously for when she did her Relief Society lesson and she said, "Come what may," and love it.
It says, "Today it was my turn to teach the lesson. The stake president chose the talk by Elder Worthland, 'Come what may and love it.' Yes, it was very appropriate for what is taking place in my life right now. I'm grateful that I remained composed and was able to give the lesson that I had planned. And then at the end, I shared what is happening with me to the sisters in the ward. Yes, there were tears, and many of these dear friends were shocked. I decided that I wanted to be the one to tell them so there wouldn't be any misunderstanding. I asked them to remember me and my family in their prayers as they fast next week. Afterwards, there were many words of encouragement for me and many hugs. I'm grateful for the strength and the support of the sisters in my ward.
The ladies from the church came over quite often. They did a lot of just visiting. She had good neighbors. She had neighbors that really cared and gathered around her, supported her.
They also made us meals. There was one time we were waiting for a meal to come. I remember my dad was like, I don't think we're eating a meal today, so let's just go ahead and make tacos. And so we started making tacos, and then the doorbell rang, and it was someone bringing us a meal, so we had to hurry and like cover up all evidence that we were making our own dinner. But our ward really supported us, and they took care of us.
I think something that helped my mom with this, running the race, resilient type of attitude was the amount of support that she got from family, friends, and our ward family. She had her support group from Skyline.
But as soon as her hair started to fall out, she went and got a haircut right away, and she had a cute little pixie cut. And then she had her friends at Skyline buzz her hair.
Jolene had come in that day, and she said, oh, I was in the shower and my hair's just falling out in handfuls. And Chris was in there, and she said, well, we can fix that.
My daughter got married, I don't know, maybe a week or two after that. And Jolene came to the wedding, and she was so excited. We had to go to another room so she could take her wig off and show me her new wig.
It was hard, but she was able to find the humor in it, and just have all those emotions of doing a hard thing, but finding something to laugh about with her friends there.
Hey, we miss you. We really miss you.
As you can tell, we haven't let anybody in the media center since you've been gone.
After she'd go to her treatment, she'd go back to school. She'd be off school for a few days, and then she'd go back to school.
She'd come back to school after doing that. And I think about that now because my husband just passed away of cancer. And I think, wow, how did you do that? After having an infusion for a couple of hours and then coming back.
So she was extremely in good shape, but not only that, but she had a really good discipline, self-discipline. And so she felt like with her determination and discipline, doing everything that the doctor wanted her to do, that she was going to be one of the 5%ers.
When Ron called that Easter Sunday of that year and said, Jolene's asking for Jill.
My dad called Jill. She saw who was calling, and they were in the middle of church, but my Uncle Craig said, you need to take that phone call, and so.
We were sitting in sacrament meeting and picked up the girls and went home and hopped in the car and headed to South Jordan.
The thing I didn't realize until I went up to spend a week with her when she wasn't feeling well was how advanced it was. I didn't realize it had been stage 4 from such an early point. I thought, there's different grades of cancer. There's in situ, then there's 1, 2, 3, 4. You definitely don't want a 4. And then I went to the registration desk for something to check her in or something, and they had her report sitting there on the desk.
When the chart fell open and Jill nurse hat kicked in, and she just started reading the chart and realized that the prognosis was much worse than we had understood.
But they said they did another scan of her brain, and it said it had snowballed, which is basically if you have a machine gun and you just it's just all over, just specks all over in the brain.
The sad thing was that as it progressed, the treatments were working on the cancer that she had, but it was popping up everywhere else.
But it spread from her right lung to her left side and then up to her brain. So it was pretty quick how it spread.
I remember the first time that she threw up from the chemo, and we're just sitting around eating dinner, and then she got up and had to go throw up in the sink. And I feel like that was the first time that it really felt like my mom had cancer, where before I just knew she was sick, but I hadn't really seen many of it. I hadn't seen evidence of it.
She was still getting radiation, and we took her in, and she just sit in the front seat, and she'd just cough up blood. And she had lost tons of weight.
I went to help her pick her up out of bed one time when she was going to go use the restroom or whatever. And I can remember putting my hand around her arm, her bicep, and I could touch my finger and my thumb.
And towards the end, I tried to go up as often as I could. I think I flew up 2 or 3 times just to be near her one last time.
I'd call her up. I do a lot of traveling and driving with my job. So a lot of times when I had downtime, just driving back from, traveling around the state, I'd call her up and, we'd talk for quite a long time. And she was just very positive. She wasn't going to let it take her, and, she was going to overcome it. And so.
But I do have to say, when I watched how Ron and Jolene handled that, they handled that with so much dignity and grace that I was in awe at them, their spirits. My admiration for all of them grew exponentially.
I remember my grandma and grandpa Haywood would come up. They came up a couple times and just stayed with us for a week or so, and then they'd go back home, and then they'd come back up. And while they were there, my grandma Haywood would do all of our cooking, all of our cleaning, all of our laundry. It would be really weird for me to come home and from school and all my clothes were just folded out on my bed. I was like, wow, who did my laundry?
But I just took over taking care of the house and the meals and the laundry and everything, so that Ron wouldn't have to worry about that, and he could just pay his full attention to Jolene. And he would sleep on the floor by the bed that she was in their bedroom, just sleep on the floor so he wouldn't bother her in the bed, and just took such good care of her.
I remember he had this journal in his bedroom, and he'd write things down that she was doing, like at 10:15 she ate half a strawberry.
And Sylvia was there, my mom was there, Ruth was there constantly, and Ron was constantly taking care of her.
He was doing good, really doing good taking care of her and getting her to chemotherapy treatments and everything like that.
I just told Ron, I'm like, this does not look good. Like, I think she should stop all her treatments. They're just making her so sick. They're making her so weak.
So that was a really special time, really hard time. Obviously, when you decide to stop treatments and you just, it's coming.
I was really composed around her, which was a blessing. But then I go into Marie's room at night. I was sleeping in the basement and I would just cry. I was so sad.
Jolene's parents were there at the house and put on a good front when they were on the outs, when they were around people, and then they would go in the bedroom where they were sleeping, and we could hear them, all their emotions, the ductwork that connected the bedroom they were in with the bedroom that we were in. We could hear them feeling the raw emotions about what was happening with Jolene, and it was a hard time, a very hard time.
She'd had multiple blessings from, I think my dad, and from her father-in-law, and I'm sure other priesthood holders. My brother and I, Dave, gave her a blessing. And I think at that time is when we realized that, that it wasn't going to have a positive outcome.
Ron, was so kind to me that one time that I came, he said, she's not doing well, he told me. But you can go in her bedroom to say goodbye. And I thought, okay. So, I came in, but the moment I put my foot in that room, I was hit with these spiritual giants that were in there. That room was full of people. And I thought, oh no, they're here. They're here to who are they? And I'm sure it was her family were there to, to greet her, to take her.
Ron was scared. Ron was pretty scared. But he would come, he was teaching, the school that he was teaching at that time was fairly close, so he would come home at lunchtime and be with her at lunchtime. And I remember him singing to her with his guitar, and sometimes it would get pretty tear-jerking to listen to him sing to her, and she enjoyed that. And she when she was just couldn't even hardly lift her head anymore, she would say to him, "You've been such a good husband. You've been so good."
We sat down and took a video, and one of the things that she said in the video, and you'll see, is that she felt like she was afraid, she was at peace with dying. She wasn't afraid of dying, she just didn't want to deal with any pain. So she made us promise that we would keep her drugged up so that she wouldn't have to deal with any pain.
I'm not afraid to die. I don't want to hurt, but I'm not afraid to die. I'm actually kind of excited to see what's on the other side.
So when I first married into the family, I grew up doing a lot of catering type things. Like I did a lot of baby showers, bridal showers, and helped out with weddings. Just that was kind of one of the things I did. And so I think I helped Nelda with something when I was new in the family, and Jolene said, "Hey, I like what you do, and will you help my girls with their weddings?" Now this was when these girls were, you know, probably 2 years old and 5 or 6 years old. She approached me with it and said, "I've made a video about my wishes."
On your marriage, refer to Stephanie. She has a lot of really good ideas.
It's probably one of the biggest honors, most humbling experiences of my life to have her ask me to do that.
But we had to pick out a casket, and that was actually really hard. I remember Jolene and I sitting at the computer, and there's all these different casket options, and we're just, it was hard, but we were laughing. And
we went to the cemetery to pick out her lot. I had some cemetery lots, and she picked out the lot she wanted to be buried in. And we were looking at caskets and everything, and she said, "I think I want one with TV in it, in the top of it, so that I can watch TV."
And she was positive to the end. And I think part of that was to show her girls in the show, you know, be positive in strength for Ron too. That even though the cancer was going to take her life, that she wasn't going to let it take her spirit.
Even with all of those goodbyes and the 1,000 last breaths, I could never imagine my life without her until she actually passed away. And I was there when she took her last breath. And my first reaction was, I was standing over her when she took her last breath, was to jump on her, do CPR, and bring her back. But at the very same moment that I thought that I need to get her back, she's gone, as I thought, no, she would never forgive me if I brought her back and made her die again. And so I didn't, and I just sat there, and I sat there with her for a few minutes, and then I went in and told everybody else that she had passed away.
Then he came out and got us and took us in and he knelt down by the bed and had prayer and just expressed his appreciation for Jolene and the good life that she lived, and they were able to have her as long as they did.
The night that she passed away, and Ron wanted to be the one to take care of her body, take care of her to the end. And he did. He took care of her to the end.
And one thing that struck me about Jolene's funeral was you have the family and friends and ward members, but how many people came from the school district, her friends at work? I've never seen so many people come from outside of this normal community that you would have at a funeral. It just showed me that how much she was loved and respected, and her relationships with all of her colleagues at the school.
So on her gravestone, she has a picture of the temple. She wanted a picture of the temple on there. And then we put teachers to the end. She was a great teacher to our kids, to so many other people's kids, and to me. And she influenced my life. And she still influences my life to this day. And I believe that she's watching over us.
I know that I have had, and I trust that I will continually have, like, impressions and thoughts and dreams that come from her, to help me in my life.
And I miss her as a friend. She really was a wonderful person, so direct. You always knew where you stood with Jolene. And yet she was so friendly. You know, she didn't hurt your feelings. She just, you knew she would tell it like it was. And I know she's doing great stuff where she is now.
But when I was pregnant with our last child, Kate, it was really hard because that's when Jolene had cancer. And so I remember wanting to tell her I was pregnant, but I was so sad because I knew she would not be there when our baby was born. And I was like, well, maybe my father sent me a daughter because he's taking my sister away. I remember showing her the ultrasound pictures of our daughter and just showing them to her. She was so excited, but it was so hard because I knew she would not be there when the baby was due. But she was so excited for me. That's just the way she was. But I remember when that daughter was born, I really felt like Jolene was in the room. In fact, I remember my husband went to sit on one of the chairs and I wanted to say, don't sit there, don't sit on Jolene. She's in that chair. Like, I felt her presence so strongly.
After she passed away, of course, I went looking for her down in Moab. And I found the tallest mountain I could go to, the highest overlook that I could get to. And I thought maybe I could feel her there. But she wasn't there. So I came home and I went to the temple. I felt her sitting next to me. So much so that I looked over and next to me and I was thinking that there was an indentation where she was sitting in the chair. I felt her. She's in the temple.
He had a real difficult time. The first year, the whole year was hard for him, that first year that she was gone.
It was a struggle for Ron. Jolene was everything to him.
If your kids are hurt or anything, you want to take all the hurt away from them. And that's kind of how I felt with Ron.
So she died in June, and I was playing in a tournament just here in I think it was just in South Jordan. It was called the Beat Digger Tournament. And so that was probably in March. But I remember she called me once and I didn't answer the phone, and she just left a message about like, hey Marie, I'm wondering if I'm gonna just meet you at your game or if you're gonna come pick me up. Just let me know, I'd love to be there. Okay, love you, bye. Just, a quick message. But that was the last voicemail that I ever got from her. It was just special for me to remember and like go back and listen to that voicemail and just hear her voice. When somebody passes away, you just kind of cling on to everything that you have. And so that voicemail about my lacrosse game was one of those things that was special for me.
And that was something else when she was sick. I was in the middle of trying to get my master's degree and I was going to quit. And she said, no, you will not quit. She would not let me quit. I ended up getting licensed about 4 weeks after she passed away. But that was a tough time. It was tough to be working on a degree and teaching full-time and then taking care of her as well. So, but I did it. I made it. And it was because of her.
I feel like throughout her whole experience of, dealing with cancer and everything, I've learned a lot more compassion and kindness and just, don't be so quick to judge because, we never know what people are going through.
Grandpa Haywood one year got all his kids, I think it was all his daughter-in-laws for Mother's Day one year. He let them pick these beautiful statues. And my mom picked, the statue she picked was a mother reading to her daughter. I feel like that just summed up my childhood. We were always reading stuff.
Her best characteristics would be, I'd say, loving people. Sometimes they'll be playing with her grandkids. I'm like, oh, they're so cute. They're so fun. Darn, I wish Jolene was here because she would be the best grandma.
I would want my kids to know about my mom that she loves them. We've had special experiences with the kids where we know that, the veil has been thin. Their grandma has been with them in our times of need, which has been very special.
I would tell them that she was fun-loving and loved life to the fullest.
Just her love for family, her love of the church, her love of Christ, her love of temples.
Everybody liked her, and she got along well with people. She was a good people person.
And I hope that her grandkids will know what a good person she was.
I feel like with my kids, I want them to know how dedicated she was to everything that she did. She didn't do anything halfway.
You know, she was she just really made an impression on my life of what a sister and a friend should be.
I think if her grandkids knew how much she loved them and how much she hoped for their future and how much faith and confidence she would have in them, I think it would change their lives if they knew the faith and hope and charity of their grandma.
I would tell her grandchildren that she loves them very much, and I think she's probably with them more than they realize. She's a grandma that is very dedicated and would love to be here with them.
I loved our life together. I loved our family life together. I loved my daughters. I still love my daughters. I love my grandkids more than anything in the world.
You never got to meet your grandma, did you? Every night I got you kissing on her picture. Cuss me up that you will never listen to the sweet, sweet sound of her voice. I could tell you she was quite the mixture of a mama and the shaman and the fiery pistol. Truth is, she's right there in you. She's a part of you, you don't have a choice. My dear, you will feel her. In your mind, you will hear her. And if she could use words, she'd say, beautiful, but don't you overplay that card. She'd say, spiritual, so don't ever forget that part. She'd say, you are so much stronger than you even think you are. Let your heart lead the way. That's what she'd say. Ooh, ooh, ooh. That's what she'd say. Ooh, ooh, ooh. She said, take care of your sisters, I mean the whole world. Spend your days trying to lift up other girls. You came with love, a purpose in your mother's curls. I'll be with you every step of the way. Hey. Don't live your life trying to blend this stick out. Trust your gut and don't you give in to those doubts. Remember, God is like the sun, he always comes out. It's when you think the dark's here to stay. My dear, you will feel her. In your mind, you will hear her. And if she could use words, she'd say, beautiful, but don't you overplay that card. She'd say, spiritual, so don't ever forget that part. She'd say, you are so much stronger than you even think you are. Let your heart lead the way. That's what she'd say. Ooh, ooh, ooh. That's what she'd say. Ooh, ooh, ooh. She'd say, listen to your daddy. In his voice you will hear me. I know he will sing my song to you. And know that I'm happy, and you'll always have me. I'm watching everything you do. She'd say, beautiful, but don't you overplay that card. She'd say, spiritual, so don't ever forget that part. She'd say, you are so much stronger than you even think you are. Let your heart lead the way. That's what she'd say. Ooh.